The first console I ever owned was the Nintendo 64. Well, I use the term owned loosely. It belonged to a family member and they let me use it. I pretty much exclusively played Super Mario 64 and Donkey Kong 64. In case it wasn't already obvious, I was only interested in playing colorful games where you jump around and collect things. So as far as I was concerned, Turok and GoldenEye existed solely to collect dust in a box. As a kid, I frequently went to a friend's place who had a bunch of Nintendo 64 games, and he showed me a ton of stuff that I had never seen before. Rocket Robot on Wheels, Mischief Makers, Space Station Silicon Valley, and of course, Ocarina of Time. This game was unlike anything I had ever seen before, albeit what I had seen wasn't a lot. When my friend booted up the game, he was at the entrance of the Great Deku Tree. After he stepped inside, I remember feeling totally bewildered by everything I was seeing. There was this weird kid in an all-green getup, some blue firefly was following him everywhere, and the walls were covered in skulls. Oh, they're spiders. But it wasn't the Skulltulas, fairies, or Link's outfit that made this moment stick with me after all these years. What stuck with me was the music. The track that plays inside the Great Deku Tree is mesmerizing. It feels mysterious, creepy, and beautiful all at the same time. This was just the tip of the iceberg. The further I got in this game, the more I'd uncover some of the game's more disturbing qualities. And somehow, I beat it. Welcome to another episode in a series where we examine the elements of horror and other spooky stuff we can find in non-horror games. In today's episode, we're talking about The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Summoned by the Great Deku Tree, Link and Navi are informed that the guardian of the Kokiri Forest has been cursed. Link is tasked with venturing inside the tree to identify the source of this curse and destroy it. We find that the interior of the tree is a complex structure full of walkways, rooms, and various puzzles to solve. It's also brimming with monsters. The carnivorous Deku Babas and sharpshooting Deku Scrubs are easy enough to deal with, but the fearsome Skulltulas always stopped me dead in my tracks. And not just because they would literally block the path forward. When I was a kid, they creeped me out, but I also sort of liked their appearance. Giant spiders were always upsetting to deal with, but the skulls on their backs are so damn cool that I had to respect it, even as a child. There are several variations of the Skulltula enemy: Big Skulltulas, Walltulas, and Gold Skulltulas. Each member of the Skulltula family bears giant skulls on their abdomens, hence the name Skulltula, a portmanteau of tarantula and skull. This skull is very durable and protects larger Skulltulas from all kinds of attacks. However, their soft underbellies are their weaknesses that they briefly leave exposed. So the best way to deal with these spiders is the same as how you deal with them in the real world. You just hit them with a stick. I literally don't even know why you have that dinky ass sword. Skulltulas look cool as hell, so obviously I had to know if anything like them exists in the real world. In my search, I found that Skulltulas look similar to several orb weaver spiders. Many of these arachnids, like the yellow garden spider and the Johto spider, have long black and yellow striped legs that resemble the ones found on a Skulltula. However, I'm sure you've noticed that these spiders are missing a giant skull on their backs. Sadly, I couldn't find any spiders that hid under a giant human skull on its back, but I did find the Noble False Widow. This spider has markings on its abdomen that sometimes look like a skull. Not exactly a giant shield that protects from swords, but it's still metal as hell. In my search, I also discovered the spiny-backed orb weaver. These spiders have a tough carapace with spines that helps them deter predators. This defense mechanism is very similar to the strong exoskeletons that Skulltulas possess. To strengthen the connection even further, the spiny-backed orb weavers come in a variety of colors, including white. The white ones don't look exactly like a skull, but hey, it's close enough, I'll take it. So if you took a spiny-backed orb weaver and fused it with a Johto spider, bam, you've got a Skulltula on your hands, basically. I'm not taking it, by the way. I don't even know why you're holding it. Another interesting aspect of the Skulltula is their ability to spin webs with ridiculously high tensile strength. Not only can they support Link's weight, but they can even remain intact if he jumps onto them from a high place. They only shatter after Link falls onto them from an even higher place, or if he uses fire. There aren't any real spiders out there that build webs strong enough to hold the weight of a small boy, but there are some pretty talented web spinners out there. The previously mentioned Johto spiders are capable of creating webs that can even catch birds. We don't actually see the Skulltulas catch any birds, but those big webs can no doubt hold the weight of a few cuckoos. Speaking of chickens, the Skulltulas wouldn't be the last thing that creeped me out as I explored the Great Deku Tree. In a dark room, a thin blanket of fog rolls along the ground. A light scraping noise suggests that we aren't here alone, but nothing stands out in the darkness. The noise sounds familiar, but it's not any cause for concern yet. The scratching noise sounds identical to the squirming of a gold Skulltula. However, shooting quick glances around the room reveals that these glimmering spiders are nowhere to be found. When we look up at the ceiling, our gaze is caught by a singular glowing eyeball. This eye belongs to Queen Gohma, the parasitic armored arachnid. Yeah, if you couldn't tell from the 5-minute side tangent about spiders, Gohma scared the shit out of me when I first laid my eyes on her. Up until now, the scariest thing I had fought in a video game was probably the giant Boo at Big Boo's haunt. Something that I really like about the battle with Gohma is the cutscene that plays when you first enter this room. After stepping inside, we briefly see from her perspective. See how the camera is suddenly on the ceiling looking down at Link? Then the camera flies over to Link, who is then shocked by the door suddenly closing behind him. It's a very short, eerie scene, and it does an excellent job at building suspense and communicating Gohma's location to the player. In case that rustling noise and Gohma's glowing eye wasn't enough, now you know that you should probably take a look at the ceiling. This type of in-game cutscene is discussed further in an interview with Shigeru Miyamoto. This interview is part of the Iwata Asks series of interviews which were conducted by Satoru Iwata, the former Nintendo global president. In this interview, Miyamoto explains that processing cutscenes like this in real time was a new challenge that first appeared during the development of Star Fox 64. Back then, it was a lot more common to use a pre-rendered cutscene that would play at a specific point in the game. The downside is that once a pre-rendered scene is created, it's difficult to change parts of them on the fly. Miyamoto states, "If I wanted to fix something, they might tell me, we'll need at least a month to fix that. In the worst case, they might say, the movie's done, so it can't be changed." Miyamoto adds, "I'd be like, huh? This would make it more fun, so why can't we fix it?" And they'd say, "Because you can't change the movies." I'd think, but what's more important to the fans? The movies or how fun it is? That's why I adopted a method of processing the movies in real time. Personally, I think the decision really paid off, especially when these scenes are framed from the perspective of Link's adversary. They're perfect for building up some suspense for the upcoming fight. I particularly enjoy the way that this type of scene is used when we fight King Dodongo at Dodongo's Cavern. This specific scene is amazing at building suspense. Before you can even see what you're fighting, you see how its loud footsteps manage to shake the ground. Then as the beast approaches, you see how this creature absolutely towers over Link. It's so menacing and cool. This type of thing also happens when we meet Morpha at the Water Temple. As we all know, I was deathly afraid of water monsters as a child. So when I saw something moving under the water here, I just let out a big sigh and accepted my fate. Nearly broke my controller in half whenever it would grab me. Back to Gohma. She's disgusting, honestly. Just like with the Gohma larva, she has a hard shell covering fleshy skin underneath. Gohma also has a long tail that she'll often use to prop herself up in the air before lunging forward. She also uses this tail to pump out fresh Gohma eggs. Okay, I'm not really sure if it's a tail anymore. Either way, it's disgusting. The way the tail undulates as it pushes out eggs is nauseating. Then the eggs plop onto the ground and pulse until a Gohma larva jumps out. The eggs also have this gross texture on them that makes them look a lot more like small organs slathered in Gohma juice. I am so sorry if you're eating right now. As much as Gohma startled me at first, that fear wore off pretty quickly once I learned the most valuable video game lesson of all time. If you're fighting something with a really big eye, you hit it in the eye every single time, especially if it's a Zelda game or a Resident Evil game. They love doing that shit. A few deku sticks later, we finally defeat Gohma and get our hands on the Kokiri's Emerald. Once we leave and speak with the Great Deku Tree, he tells us about the evil man who cursed him. This man is after the Triforce, an ancient relic that contains the essence of the gods. We're told to head to Hyrule Castle and meet the Princess of Destiny. As the Great Deku Tree finishes relaying this information, he begins to wither and die. We make our way to Hyrule Castle where we meet a young Princess Zelda. She's delighted to see the Kokiri's Emerald in our possession and she asks us to fetch the other two spiritual stones, the Goron's Ruby and the Zora's Sapphire. On our trek to obtain the Ruby, we make a quick stop in a nearby village. Sitting at the foot of Death Mountain is the peaceful Kakariko village. Founded by members of the enigmatic Sheikah tribe, this small town once exclusively accommodated the Sheikah. This was until Impa, Zelda's loyal caretaker, had opened up the village to people all across Hyrule. While this village may appear blissful on the surface, this place has a wealth of secrets. This is the House of Skulltula, a dark, empty house full of spiderwebs. As we make our way to the center of the room, a large Skulltula zips down from the ceiling. Unlike typical monsters, this one hesitates to attack. The reason why is because this Skulltula is actually a human. In fact, this entire house is full of human Skulltula hybrids. The one in the center explains that they all look like this because of the spider's curse. The only way to break this curse is by destroying every spider of the curse and collecting the token that they leave behind. These cursed spiders are the gold Skulltulas we first discovered inside the Great Deku Tree, and there are 100 of them to find. Of course, you don't have to get them all, but then you have to live with the guilt of knowing that you left these poor people stuck as gross spider monsters. Then again, it is debatable whether or not they're deserving of your help. An old man in the village tells us a rumor about a wealthy family that once lived here, but they were cursed for their greed. This family is also referenced by the Zora shop owner. When you try to buy the Zora tunic, they state that they're afraid that only a rich family in Kakariko can afford the tunic. So clearly this rich family has enough notoriety to be recognized all across Hyrule, and they're mainly known for being rich and greedy. This family is no doubt the family that we find in the House of Skulltula. They even tell Link that they'll make him very rich if he breaks the curse. And hey, they do make good on this promise if you help them out. So maybe they learn their lesson and become a bit more charitable after being saved. That, or they only help Link because he saved them. Hopefully they're not too mad at the other villagers for not trying to help break the curse. Maybe we should have just left them as spiders. Did anybody else get jump scared by these guys when you first entered the House of Skulltula? Dude, I nearly beat the brakes off this guy. I don't know why he jumped out like that. Jesus Christ. In the back of Kakariko Village is a graveyard full of those who had sworn loyalty to the royal family. The soothing track that played in the village has disappeared in favor of silence. It's weird. The graveyard feels simultaneously creepy and kind of tranquil. If we enter the graveyard at night, we'll run into Dampé the Gravekeeper. He hosts the heart-pounding grave-digging tour, and for just 10 rupees, you can have him dig up treasure hidden around the graveyard. I felt bad because on my first playthrough, I was always creeped out by Dampé, and I avoided him at all costs. He's actually a pretty nice guy, and I'm always happy to see him show up in a Zelda game. At night, we're also free to move the gravestones to uncover secrets, or just defile graves for no reason. If you're really unlucky, you can trigger an encounter with a Poe, a lingering spirit of the dead. While Skulltulas had my kid self on edge, Poes never frightened me all too much. In fact, I thought they were pretty cute. Yeah, I know, it probably doesn't make any sense. Can you believe that the kid who was afraid of his own shadow didn't flinch one bit once a ghost appeared out of nowhere? It started with the Boos from Mario, then Gengar from Pokemon, and continued to the Poes from Zelda. This is partly where the name Ghost Surge comes from, as a reference to my love of ghosts, the paranormal, and the horror genre. Just like with the Skulltulas, there are a few variations of the Poe enemy. Regular Poes, Big Poes, the Phantom Guide in the Haunted Wasteland, and a few special Poes. For now, let's just focus on the basic Poes we bump into in the graveyard. These specters are obscured by their tattered, pale clothes. All we can make out is their glowing eyes and pointed noses. They sort of resemble a plague doctor's mask. In one hand they carry a lantern which they use to attack. Despite the various Poes all having different designs, they all carry a lantern, or a torch, which typically carries their soul. A soul inside a lantern? Huh. Everyone has a torch to burn, and this is theirs. Another similarity that all Poes share is their high-pitched laughter. Did you know that this laugh is just a sped-up version of Ganondorf's laugh? Give it a listen. This same technique is used for the laughter of the Stall children in Hyrule Field. If this bit of trivia sounds familiar, you're probably thinking of the Boo laughter from Super Mario 64. Their laugh is a sped-up version of Bowser's. Once a Poe is defeated, their ghostly form vanishes and their lantern drops to the ground. This shattered lantern often releases a Poe soul, which can be captured in a bottle. Poe souls can be sold when Link reaches adulthood, more on that later, or you can eat them. Drink them? Consume them. Yeah, that's insane. What are you doing as a villager of Kakariko going to visit your dead grandpa and you see a 10-year-old eating his ghost? What do you even do? He's got sticks that kill monsters and you've got a chicken allergy. It's not even like eating a Poe soul is worth it. They only heal a small amount and even have a chance of reducing Link's health instead. So you're really only doing this to be a dick? While I really do want to judge young Link, I was no better as a child. I used to just keep Poes in a bottle. Just cuz. I liked having ghosts on me as a sort of good luck charm, so I just kept them. I never consumed them either, but I am curious about how they taste. Do they taste like anything at all, or is it more of like a texture thing? The name of these ectoplasmic light keepers is possibly a reference to Edgar Allan Poe. While it hasn't been confirmed by Nintendo, the connection makes sense. Poe is most known for his gothic horror stories, so naming a ghost after him feels very appropriate. There's even a Poe in Oracle of Ages named Alan, further strengthening this connection between Poes and American horror author Alan Wake. We'll get to the other Poe variants later, so for now let's just keep digging around in the graveyard. At the far end of the lot there is a giant tombstone. As we approach, the silence is disturbed by the crack of thunder and water droplets slamming into the ground. Inspecting the tombstone reveals that this is the royal family's tomb. The two graves on the right and left belong to the royal composer brothers, Sharp and Flat. Inspecting their graves summons their spirits and they attack. The Composer Bros are two special Poe variants. The duo have their own unique red and green clothing, a baton, a decorative Triforce, and they even sport hair and mustaches. They're clearly meant to resemble Mario and Luigi. Weird that this game has two Mario and Luigi references. Defeating them causes their soul to pop out, but they unfortunately can't be devoured. Instead, these souls will tell you the story of their lives as composers for the royal family. When they were alive, they studied the mystical powers of the royal family and how to control the flow of time with an ocarina. Ganondorf tried to steal this research conducted by the brothers, and they gave their lives to keep this secret. Luckily, the brothers did not die in vain and inscribed one of their magical melodies onto the royal tombstone. All we have to do now is head inside. Keys hang from the walls and ceilings of this dark catacomb. Drops of water fly past these bats and plummet into piles of bones strewn about the room. Interacting with the bones on the right side of the room gives us a message. The corpse warns of lurkers in the dark that will harm those who break into the royal tomb. A skull on the left side of the room advises that you shine light on the living dead. These messages only offer a vague warning as to what waits in the next room. These are ReDeads, the lurkers in the dark that protect the royal tomb. When we step into the room, the ReDeads don't immediately attack. Instead, they stand in silence, occasionally jittering but never taking a step forward. If we take a slow stroll through the room, we can get by without disturbing any of these monsters. If we go for a mad dash to the next room, the ReDeads will awaken and paralyze us with fear. Encounters with the ReDeads traumatized a generation of children, myself included. In case you're wondering how I reacted, it's honestly all a blur. Not everyone was disturbed by Skulltulas or Pose, but we can all agree that the ReDeads are utterly terrifying. That petrifying shriek makes you feel powerless as the creature ambles towards you. As you rapidly press every button on the controller hoping to break free from this trance, your gaze fixates on the ReDead's appearance. It's the size of a full-grown Hylian. Its bones push against a thin layer of skin, and 3 empty holes make up this creature's face. The official art for the ReDead illustrates that their face is hidden beneath a wooden mask, a detail that I never noticed from their in-game appearance on the Nintendo 64. This detail is also made a lot more clear in the 3DS remake of OOT. Link can even wear a very similar mask during the mask trading sequence. The third mask we obtain in this sequence is the Spooky Mask. It looks almost identical to the ReDead's mask. If you wear this mask and show it to the lakeside scientist, he explains that this mask is made from a plank of wood used in a coffin. Very spooky. Once a ReDead is close enough, they latch onto Link and sink their teeth into him. Button mashing is the only way to escape the ReDead's grasp. You'll only be spared a few seconds to escape before the ReDeads scream again and close the distance. It goes without saying, but ReDeads are in a league of their own when it comes to Zelda enemies. Throughout the series, enemies in Zelda games undergo design changes to better reflect the game's art style and tone. Enemies may become more cutesy or threatening depending on the game they appear in. Just look at the Pose in Oracle of Ages. They're a bunch of cuties. And now look at the Pose in Twilight Princess. I am so glad that I waited until high school before playing Twilight Princess. One thing that remains consistent is the terrifying nature of the ReDeads. Often do they retain their grotesque appearances and their iconic scream. Even more adorable ReDeads like the ones in Echoes of Wisdom are still fairly unnerving. I have to admit though, one of my favorite parts of this game specifically was being able to sick the ReDeads onto people. Come on, it's just one. I always assumed that the ReDeads are simply what their name suggests, the reanimated dead. However, the trophy descriptions in the Super Smash Bros. Games propose a unique origin for these monsters. It should be noted though that this information is often regarded as non-canon since it's coming from Smash Bros. And not an official Zelda game, so keep that in mind. The trophy descriptions for the ReDeads in Melee reads as follows. 7 years after Ganondorf took control of Hyrule, ReDeads roamed the ruins of Castletown, moaning. At first, Link was shocked at the state of the town and the apparent lack of survivors. He later learned that the townsfolk had evacuated to safety and that the ReDeads were just magic animated into hideous humanoid shapes. The trophy description in Smash 4 adds, "These creatures may look like zombies, but unlike the Walking Dead, ReDeads have never been human. They just seem to be clay monsters fashioned in the shape of humans. They attack Link when he gets too close, making spine-chilling noises that are hard to describe with words alone. Best not to try, just get rid of them." A popular theory online suggests that the ReDeads are inspired by Haniwa. These real-life clay figures, if you remember from the Okami video, are believed to be used for commemorating the dead during the Kofun period of Japan. This theory is fueled not only by the Smash trophy descriptions, but also the masks that the ReDeads wear. They look a lot like the face of a Haniwa. ReDeads also appear in places associated with death. the royal family's tomb, the bottom of the well, and the Shadow Temple. There is a fantastic theory video by Zeltik that dives deeper into the origin of the ReDeads and their connection to the royal family. You should totally check it out. There is a link to the video in the description. At the end of the tomb, we discover the secret melody of the Composer Brothers, the Sun Song. A poem accompanying the song advises us to give peaceful rest to the living dead. This is a hint towards the special effect of the Sun Song. Playing it near a ReDead will temporarily freeze them in place, allowing us to safely exit the tomb. And you bet your ass I was playing that song anytime I even thought a ReDead was nearby. Sometimes I just play it for no reason. It's just a little comfort thing. Back on the surface, we go after the other two spiritual stones. Helping the Gorons and defeating King Dodongo earns us the Goron's Ruby, and a big group hug from the Gorons. Down at the Zora's domain, we promise King Zora that we'll rescue his daughter, Princess Ruto. She's been eaten alive by Lord Jabu-Jabu, the patron deity of the Zoras. We offer this gluttonous god a little fish and he inhales it along with Link without hesitation. Scarlet muscles and indigo veins line the walls of Jabu-Jabu's insides. The doors here are closed walls of tissue that briefly rip open before sealing again. The multiple switches that we find are raised, hardened organs, flattening into the ground when we step on them. Some of the rooms we enter have flesh that bounces and wiggles as Link battles monsters, communicating that our attacks that fail to hit their target are actually hurting Jabu-Jabu instead. Gotta play it safe in here. While it's not the most horrifying dungeon in the game, Jabu-Jabu's belly is pretty gross, which is why I'm bringing it up. This wasn't my first journey inside of a giant fish. No, that happened during my playthrough of Banjo-Kazooie. In Clanker's Cavern, we go inside the titular Clanker, and yeah, it's also disgusting. I remember thinking about all the things inside of Clanker and what sort of purpose they might have served in his body. Like, what are all these fleshy spike things for? Some sort of defense mechanism? What about all these hula hoops? What are these things for? This line of thinking carried over to OOT. When I got to Jabu-Jabu's belly, I would stare at the different features and wonder why they were here. Like, what are these holes here for? Are they to help with digesting food? What about the switches? Does Jabu-Jabu's body have a way of pressing each one on its own whenever they need to be pressed? Why are there even switches in the first place? Obviously, the answer is because this is a video game. I highly doubt that realism was the goal as the dev team worked on this dungeon. However, that didn't stop me from creating nonsensical theories about Jabu-Jabu's anatomy. Oh, Jabu-Jabu has a uvula. So it's a girl fish. While the dungeon itself is pretty confusing and kind of annoying to get through, one thing I really do enjoy about it, of course, is the music. The track that plays here does something really interesting. That drum beat that you hear throughout the song mimics the sound of a heartbeat. This heartbeat even sounds a little strange and irregular, hinting at Jabu-Jabu's illness. Before we step inside the fish, a conversation with King Zora reveals that Jabu-Jabu's been a little green around the gills ever since Ganondorf came around. In the song, we can also hear Jabu-Jabu's groans of pain, likely a result of the illness that Ganondorf has inflicted. As we explore the fish, we discover the origin of this illness, a series of slimy parasitic tentacles that tunnel through Jabu-Jabu's body. They're tough and strike hard enough to send Link flying. Sadly, dispatching these tentacles isn't enough to cure the fish of his illness. The only way to save Jabu-Jabu is to exterminate Baronade, the bioelectric anemone. That cutscene that plays before the fight uses the same technique that we see before the fight with Queen Gohma. For a moment we see from a stray Bari's perspective before the camera flies over to Link and this Bari rejoins Baronade. I feel like the team had a lot of fun with creating these in-engine cutscenes. Defeating yet another giant parasite gets us the Zora's Sapphire. It's kind of weird, right? That's 2 out of 3 young Link dungeons where he journeys inside of an organic being to eliminate a parasitic monster. We don't enter a living creature on our trek through Dodongo's cavern, but we do travel through the remains of a giant dead Dodongo. The ceiling of Dodongo's cavern is even adorned with the ribcage of this thing. So like, it totally counts, right? With all 3 spiritual stones in hand, we make our way back to Hyrule Castle to meet with Zelda. At the front gate to Hyrule Castle Town, we catch Zelda and Impa fleeing on horseback. Zelda throws us the magical Ocarina of Time, and we turn to see Ganondorf waiting behind us. The music in this scene, combined with the sounds of pouring rain and roaring thunder in the background, made this encounter feel so special. As it should. This is the ominous threat that's been teased from the very beginning of the game. Up until now, our only meeting with Ganondorf was through a window in the Hyrule Castle courtyard. Throughout our adventure up to this point, we familiarized ourselves with Ganondorf through his acts of cruelty across Hyrule. Up until now, we've only arrived on the scene after Ganondorf has already done harm. At this moment, we finally have a chance to stop him once and for all. If only it were that easy. I remember getting goosebumps from this scene as a kid. This time it was a mixture of fear and excitement for recognizing that this is the same scene that played out at the beginning of the game in Link's sleep. When Ganondorf strikes Link down in a single magic spell, it really conveys that Link is nowhere near ready to face this evil thief. As Ganondorf rides off, we collect the Ocarina of Time and head into Castle Town. In the back alley area of town, there is a royal soldier leaning up against one of the houses. Elated to have finally met us, he relays some important information regarding Ganondorf. Sometime before we arrived, Ganondorf had betrayed the King of Hyrule. Impa sensed danger and immediately fled with Zelda. This soldier here tried his best to hold back Ganondorf's men, but ended up sustaining life-threatening injuries. He tells us that Zelda wanted to give Link something special and that this item should be taken to the Temple of Time. Once he finishes speaking, he collapses. Interacting with him again displays Link's inner thoughts. He's not moving anymore. There's something so deeply unsettling about the upbeat Castletown theme blasting in the background as this man just dies. A few feet away from this man's corpse is a lively town full of people running around, dancing, and bursting into laughter. While they aren't totally oblivious to Ganondorf's scheme, they don't fully grasp the danger they're in either. Townsfolk tell Link about how they saw Impa and Zelda flee the castle, with Ganondorf chasing after them. But they don't know what to make of the situation. What's gonna happen now? With all 3 spiritual stones in place, we gain access to a hidden room containing the legendary Master Sword. As Link pulls the sword from its pedestal, he is engulfed in a bright blue light. What should be a triumphant moment is ruined by another appearance from Ganondorf. To summarize a lengthy cutscene, Ganondorf has gained access to the Sacred Realm after Link had opened the Door of Time. Ganondorf then seized the Triforce and became the king of evil that reigned over Hyrule. Rauru the Sage informs us that we can still defeat Ganondorf with the power of the Sages. It's up to us to journey across Hyrule and find the other Sages though. With their power combined, we'll be able to finally defeat Ganondorf once and for all. Rauru also reveals to us that 7 years have passed since pulling the Master Sword out of its pedestal. He states that Link was too young to be the hero of time, so his spirit was sealed in the Sacred Realm until it was time for him to awaken. The game doesn't really dote much on this detail, but looking back on it as an adult has given me a new perspective. I feel like Link's transformation is a little bit unsettling. I can't imagine losing 7 whole years of my life, especially my childhood. Link not only loses 7 years of his life, but once he awakens, he is immediately thrown back into the fray. No time to adjust or reminisce on his lost childhood. All of his focus is put on saving the world. Conversely, the younger version of myself thought it was so cool to magically become an adult at will. I thought of growing up as becoming the coolest and most badass version of yourself. See, adult Link didn't use a silly little slingshot or a tiny dagger. He had a bow and arrow, and the Master Sword. I felt so powerful whenever I was adult Link. I remember getting very upset anytime the game made me transform back into a child. Anyways, back to the mission. There are 5 sages scattered across the world for us to find. We're told by a mysterious man named Sheik that a sage is waiting for us in the Forest Temple. This temple is located deep in the Lost Woods at Kokiri Forest. Anxious to see what's happened to our home after all this time, we book it. Outside the Temple of Time, we see that the skies have changed. That calm baby blue has been swallowed up by an ominous dark purple. A giant ring has formed around Death Mountain as it swirls and illuminates the dreary atmosphere. It is said that the clouds surrounding the peak reflect the condition of Death Mountain. When they look normal, it is at peace. We remember the wise owl's words and we better understand how much times have changed for the worse. In the market area, we get an even better understanding of how worse things really are. Castletown has been completely razed to the ground. The town is now populated with ReDeads. Defeating one of the monsters alerts every ReDead to Link's presence, yet they don't rush to attack him. They trudge straight past him and stand over the corpse of the fallen ReDead. It's like they're mourning. Some ReDeads will even crouch near a corpse and shiver. Some interpret this as the ReDead eating a corpse, while others see this as the ReDead crying over its deceased companion. However you view it, this interaction definitely has an impact on my relationship with these creatures. On our way out of town, we can stop by the Ghost Shop. Owned by the creepy Poe collector, this shop specializes in the trading of Poe souls. Link can sell a regular Poe soul for 10 rupees or the soul of a big Poe for 50 rupees. This type of Poe is encountered in Hyrule Field and functions similarly to a regular Poe. Big Poes are dressed up in a big gray-white cloth that has a zigzag shape at the top of their heads. Their lantern has a unique design, and these Poes wear a necklace with a skull on it. That skull iconography makes me wonder if these Poes somehow have a stronger connection to death. Maybe they've been dead for much longer, and this heightened connection has also influenced the appearance of these Poes. Either way, if my soul was sold for just $50, I'd be pretty pissed about it. Back in Kokiri Forest after all these years is a strange feeling. Just like the residents of the forest, this place looks completely unaffected by the passage of time. The only noteworthy change is the abundance of monsters. One Kokiri child explains that the monsters have appeared more frequently ever since the Great Deku Tree withered away. Unfortunately for us, there are even more hostile forces waiting for us inside the Lost Woods. Navigating through this confusing series of logs lands us in the sacred forest meadow. We traverse through a much simpler maze and finally reach the Forest Temple. The song that plays in this temple captures that same feeling I felt in the Great Deku Tree. It's that unusual blend of fear and serenity. It's a joy to listen to. In the main area of the temple, there are 4 torches lit. Each flame is a different color. The embers disperse and 4 Poes appear that match the color of the fire they carry. The ghosts fly off into different corners of the temple, and it's up to us to locate them. The Forest Temple is really unique for its interior. It feels a lot less like I'm exploring a temple and more like I'm walking through an abandoned castle. In the temple's courtyards, we can see the bright blue sky above. We can also see the crenellations of a castle on these walls. Those are the square blocks poking out from the wall. They kind of look like upside down teeth. They're commonly found on medieval castles and mainly served as a way to provide additional defense from attacks. Understanding that the Forest Temple was once a castle leads to so many questions, especially regarding the Poe sisters. Maybe at some point in time they were once members of a royal family. During our exploration of this abandoned castle, we run into a few more supernatural enemies. In the hallway north of the main area, we're acquainted with Bubbles. They're floating skulls engulfed in fire that soar through the air with bat wings. Their badass appearance clashes very hard with their cutesy name. In the original Legend of Zelda on NES, these monsters look a lot more like literal bubbles, which is probably where the name comes from. In the room at the end of this hall, we're ambushed by two Stalfos, skeleton warriors equipped with a sword and shield. They are no pushovers and successfully block many of Link's attacks. The only way to deal any damage against these guys is by taking advantage of any brief moment where they drop their guard. You can also use deku nuts to stun them and extend this window of vulnerability. While the Stalfos may look like ordinary, boring skeleton monsters that exist in dozens of video games, they actually have some pretty cool lore. During the Big Goron Sword side quest, we need to bring an odd potion to a sick man in the Lost Woods. Sadly, when we arrive on the scene, it is too late and the man is gone. One of the Kokiri children nearby tells us that he turned into a Stalfos. That guy isn't here anymore. Anybody who comes into the forest will be lost. Everybody will become a Stalfos. Everybody. Stalfos. So he's not here anymore. She even laughs and asks Link if he will become a Stalfos too. Shit, what is her problem? Adults aren't the only ones who can receive a monstrous transformation once they lose their way in the Lost Woods. Children who can't escape the forest become Skull Kids. We can run into some Skull Kids in the Lost Woods both as young Link and adult Link. Navi's comment on them states, "Is this what happens to kids who get lost in the forest?" If we play Saria's song for the Skull Kid, we get a piece of heart as a gift. Trying to befriend the Skull Kid as an adult is impossible. They don't really like grown-ups. But I'm sure it's fine to leave them be. I mean, what's the worst that a little Skull Kid can even do to you anyways? In the Forest Temple, we come across a twisted corridor that bends as we walk on through. Navi abruptly stops us and warns of monsters that hang from the ceiling. Using our first-person view to look up doesn't reveal any monsters, so maybe she's referring to a different room? Standing still for long enough will show you what she means. Nightmare Fuel. That disembodied hand is a wall master, and just like with the ReDeads, they made me want to put this game down and never pick it up again. People always said that Navi was annoying, but I was always extremely thankful that she warned me of nearby wall masters. That death scene is engraved onto my soul. Seeing adult Link being dragged away by this monster served as a grim reminder that I wasn't nearly as invincible as I thought I was. Before a wallmaster drops down from the ceiling, we can see its shadow grow beneath Link's feet. If we dodge the hand, we can destroy it before it rises back up to the ceiling. They don't put up much of a fight, but if they escape, they get another chance to grab you. It's best to deal with Fernando fingertips here as quickly as possible. Especially if you're someone like me who occasionally forgets to pause the game when you're checking your phone. In this dungeon, we also run into floor masters, which are very similar to wall masters, but they won't fall from the ceiling and try to strangle you. Floor masters are on the floor. Shocker, I know. They also split up into several smaller floor masters once enough damage is dealt to them. If they latch onto Link in this state, they drain his life and grow back to a regular-sized floor master. The parasitic monsters are just never ending in this game. Finally locating some of these supernatural sisters, it's time to lay these souls to rest. This group of Poes all have unique clothing, eyes, and face shapes. And while this is just a silly little coincidence, I thought it would be worth mentioning that the colors of the Poe sisters are similar to the colors of the 4 Links in the Legend of Zelda 4 Swords. One of the sisters can even split into multiple copies. 4 Swords, of course, didn't release until years and years later, but it's a funny little bit of real life foreshadowing. The sisters fight a lot like regular Poes, using their torches to attack and occasionally turning invisible. The final Poe sister that we fight uses a special cloning technique, making it very difficult to know which one is the real enemy. Well, it would have been difficult if the real one didn't do a little dancey dance every time she reappears. I honestly feel kind of bad for destroying these ghosts. Before the battle with the final Poe sister, we see her on the floor at the center of the forest temple. She's sniffling and wiping her eyes, crying, knowing that she's the last one left of her siblings. Speaking of the siblings, did you know that they all have official names? The red one is Joelle, the blue one is Beth, the green one is Amy, and the purple one is Meg. These names are believed to be inspired by the March sisters from the book Little Women. There's Margaret March, Josephine March, and Elizabeth March, who all go by Meg, Jo, and Beth respectively. And of course, there's the youngest of the family, Amy March. I love that both literary references in Ocarina of Time are represented by ghosts. I feel like it's a cute way of acknowledging the age of both Little Women and Edgar Allan Poe. I think that it also encompasses how the author of Little Women, Louisa May Alcott, and Edgar Allan Poe have continued to influence people from beyond the grave. With all 4 ghosts defeated, it's time to battle the boss of the Forest Temple. Following the steps leading up to a large platform, we find ourselves surrounded by 6 identical paintings hanging on the walls. Trying to leave causes bars to shoot out from the floor, blocking the entrance. We turn around and see an evil spirit from beyond, Phantom Ganon. This spectral version of Ganondorf looks a lot like the original and even rides on the same beautiful steed that we see as young Link. This version of Ganondorf also wears a skull mask that has 2 giant horns on it. I'll be honest, the TV I had as a kid wasn't the best, and I couldn't get a clear look at Phantom Ganon. So I had thought for literal years that this version of Ganondorf was wearing like a bunny mask for some reason. I don't know. During the battle, Phantom Ganon will jump into the paintings on the walls of the arena. As he emerges, we have to shoot the real Phantom Ganon with the bow, or else he'll hit us with a lightning attack. This imagery of seeing someone jumping in and out of paintings should be enough to remind you of another Nintendo 64 classic. In the previously mentioned Iwata Asks interview with Shigeru Miyamoto, they discuss how Ganon's castle was originally going to be the only setting in the game. Miyamoto states, "Yes, I thought about putting in all kinds of adventures into different rooms, like making a dark meadow or an ocean, like in Princess Peach's castle in Super Mario 64. The forest temple resembling a castle is likely a remnant of this idea." Later in the interview, Miyamoto confirms that the console's processing abilities are what led to them considering a single hub area for the game. The team was really unsure if they'd be able to create such a big, sprawling area like Hyrule Field, but they somehow pulled it off, and it's one of the best parts of the game. Though I really do want to know how they would have handled Ganon's castle as the only setting. Would we have also jumped through paintings, or would rooms magically change into different areas? Think like the open area we see in the Water Temple. This room even transforms back to normal after we defeat the mini-boss here. Maybe that kind of magic would have worked for Ganon's castle. One walk down memory lane and a game of ping pong later, we defeat Phantom Ganon. With the Sage of the Forest Temple rescued, we've got 4 sages left to save. There's one temple in particular that I've been dying to talk about, but before we do, let's briefly touch on the other temples. That way we can focus on the big one later. Starting with the Fire Temple, there isn't much terror to be found in these magma-filled ruins. The scariest thing in this temple is the like, a sentient pile of sludge. They slowly drift around the room while making this gross sloshing noise. If they get close enough to Link, they'll bend towards him and suck him up. The like will chew and crush up Link before spitting him back out. This not only deals damage, but may also result in Link losing his shield or tunic. The only way to get your items back is by quickly killing the like and picking up your items. We've done some light name analysis in this video, and for the most part I've been able to guess where each of the enemy names come from before even doing any research. But with the likes, I genuinely have no idea where this name comes from. There is a bit of information on the likes that can be found in their trophy description in Super Smash Bros. Melee. Again, info in the Smash games is often regarded as non-canon, so take this with a grain of salt. In The Legend of Zelda, these slow-footed monsters inhaled Link and ate his shield, just beating out Wallmasters for the coveted title of most aggravating enemies ever. Supposedly their name comes from an old, almost indecipherable Hyrulean proverb. Shield eaters and world leaders have many likes alike. A post on Legends of Localization explains that the name like originates from a real-life Japanese proverb. In this post, this user explains how the Japanese description for the likes uses a real Japanese proverb instead of a fake Hylian one. OP explains that this proverb, that I can't pronounce, essentially means to each his own. The post on Legends of Localization is a pretty interesting read, so I've made sure to provide a link to this post in the description. Moving on to the Water Temple, there's not a whole lot to discuss here either. Unless you were like me and feared basically everything and anything that lurked beneath the water's surface, you got through this dungeon a-okay. What I want to focus on here is this temple's mini-boss. The majority of the walls in the Water Temple are made up of blue stones, sometimes engraved with symbols and patterns. The room where we find our mini-boss is unlike anything in the temple. The stone walls from before have been replaced with an endless fog. The concrete floors have changed into a shallow body of water that stretches across the area into infinity. The only major feature in this room is a single dead tree on top of a sand mound. Walking up to the tree, we see Link's reflection in the water below. Once we pass the tree, his reflection suddenly disappears. Turning back around, we see a shadowy figure standing next to the tree. Approach it and we initiate a battle with Dark Link. Navi's advice? Conquer yourself. This fight had me on the edge of my seat. I wasn't afraid necessarily, I just thought that Dark Link was cool as hell. I loved Dark Link. I was that edgy kid that was always using the Dark Link ults in Super Smash Bros. I don't even know why I was so infatuated with him to begin with. I think it was because Shadow the Hedgehog brainwashed me into thinking that the evil version of any character is really just the cooler version. And if his appearance didn't win you over, check out this sick move. I'm not even mad, that was so cool. Circling back to Dark Link's appearance, I'm sure you've noticed that he's slightly transparent. It's almost as if he's manifested from Link's own shadow. While I was searching for potential inspirations behind Dark Link's design, I found out that he may be inspired by Peter Pan's shadow. In a 2012 interview with GameCult, Miyamoto actually confirmed that Link's design was inspired by Peter Pan. When designing Link's sprite, Takashi Tezuka looked to Disney for inspiration. Miyamoto also mentions in this interview that he himself is a pretty big fan of Disney. With the knowledge that Link is inspired by Peter Pan in mind, all of the similarities start to hit you very quickly. There's obviously the green outfits, the fairy companions, and being from a place where the residents never grow up. Now, if we go a step further and extend that to Dark Link, it's possible that he's inspired by Peter Pan's shadow. In The Adventure of Link, you even fight an enemy known as Link's Shadow, so it's not a completely far-fetched idea. I think what makes Dark Link so memorable is that there's no mention of him up to this point in the game. When he appears, it's in a special room that differs completely from the rest of the temple. There's also no special in-game cutscene like the ones we see with Gohma, King Dodongo, and Baronade. Dark Link just stands there, menacingly. The fight's difficulty also plays into that memorability. Dark Link mirrors all of your attacks, so he can basically parry anything you throw at him. Anything except for this. Don't let anybody tell you that mage classes are lame. Now at the Spirit Temple, I want to talk about the two witches that inhabit this place, Kotake and Koume. These 400-year-old twin sisters are masters of fire and ice magic. They also served as the surrogate mother for Ganondorf, no doubt raising him to be the hellacious villain that we know him as today. These witches have names that are believed to be inspired by characters from a book. Again, there are so many literary references in this game. The names Kotake and Koome come from characters in The Village of the Eight Graves by Seishi Yokomizo. In this book, these characters are two old women that are also twin sisters. The characters in the book are also pretty nefarious. It's so weird because when we defeat the twins, we see them surrounded by a bright light with halos over their heads. They literally raised the king of evil, kidnapped an innocent woman, brainwashed her, and they still go to heaven? Maybe they were just really good moms. I don't know. Okay, it's time for what we've all been waiting for. A disgruntled man in Kakariko Village tells us about a mean kid that messed up the windmill 7 years ago. He teaches us the melody that still haunts him from that cursed day, the Song of Storms, my favorite song in Ocarina of Time. One bootstrap paradox later, and we manage to drain the water in the well, unveiling a hidden path at the bottom. We go and check it out. Skulltulas, Bubbles, and ReDeads have taken up residence in this dark, blood-stained dungeon. They're accompanied by the lingering spirits of those who've died here. Navi's heightened sensitivity alerts her to the supernatural, allowing her to hear the spirits whispering in each room. While this facility has a room dedicated for housing the dead, it seems like it was severely underestimated how much carnage there would be. Only a few lucky souls were laid to rest in these coffins. The rest had their remains scattered throughout the blood-soaked halls. Below the illusory floors here exists a cave system that's been made into a den for the ReDeads. They rest near a giant green pool with skeletal hands poking out from the top of this harmful liquid. You can't help but wonder if the ReDeads are here to mourn these drowned skeletons. Guys, this level scared the shit out of me. I don't even think my 6-year-old self could beat this thing on his own. I'm pretty sure I had a family member or a friend beat it for me. This was way too intense. And before you ask, who was it that helped you? Was it perhaps the friend that you mentioned at the start of the video? Let me answer with, no. No, that guy did not help me. In fact, he never even let me play Ocarina of Time in the first place. I wouldn't play the game for the first time until a year or two later when someone else let me borrow it. This guy would only let me watch him play games. He never let me play them, ever. The funny thing is, this is a totally different guy from the one I mentioned in my Ratchet & Clank video. The guy that I'm talking about now, his mom would often babysit for me and my siblings, and I hated whenever I'd have to go to his place. He never ever let me play any of his games. Then one day he just stopped playing Zelda. He was over it, bored, would rather play Rocket Robot on Wheels. So now I couldn't even watch him play the game and he refused to lend it to me. But there was one day where he left me unattended with his Nintendo 64. He left it on the main menu for Rocket, and seeing that this was my only opportunity, I did something really bad. A few minutes later, he came back to the room and saw that 2 of his save files had been erased. He immediately asked if I did it, and I played dumb and told him that I didn't know how to read, which was a blatant lie. What happened was that when I picked up the controller, I accidentally tapped the right bumper, and after that point, if you try to select a save file, it'll ask if you wanted to erase it. And I was in such a hurry to hurry up and play the game that I just kept mashing the A button, and then I deleted the save. As for the second time, I genuinely don't know how I did that a second time in a row. That one might have been motivated by revenge, I'll be completely honest. He was crushed, but he continued playing the game as if nothing happened. He also continued to never let me play any of his games ever again, and I understand. Don't worry though, karma did eventually kick my ass. In middle school, I bought Persona 3 on the PSN store, and my 80 hours of gameplay was lost in an instant. Don't even know how it happened. I just woke up one morning and it was gone. Didn't touch the game again for years. This little story of mine is one of the greatest sins I've carried with me throughout my life, and I just have 2 things that I want to say. Firstly, Derek, if you're watching this somehow, Dude, how you doing? What's up? Let's get drinks and apps sometime. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Tears of the Kingdom. And secondly, Derek, you're an asshole. This could have all been avoided if you had just let me play Zelda. I regret nothing. Why did you even have multiple save files for the game? You never let anyone else even play it. I'd get it if it was an RPG or something like that, but it's a platformer. Was it to replay missions? Which ones? If it's the roller coaster one, okay, yeah, I kind of get it. That one's really cool. But you could have just played Roller Coaster Tycoon like a normal person. Oh, yes. The bottom of the well. When I first entered this dungeon, that music had brought me to a complete stop. When this track hit my ears, I could feel the dread just washing over me. It was like a ReDead had frozen my body in place. You know, maybe Derek was doing me a favor. This sinister track is also the one that plays in the Shadow Temple. Throughout the entirety of this track, we can hear the sound of bongos. This is obviously a nod to that dungeon's boss, who we'll talk more about later. In this track, we also hear the occasional hissing and breathing noises. As a kid, I struggled to discern whether or not this was part of the music, or if these sounds were coming from a monster skulking around the next corner. This track is so oppressive and cold. It feels like a phantom breathing down your neck. It's part of what solidifies the Shadow Temple as my favorite in the game. Another thing that makes the bottom of the well so horrifying is the appearance of normal red blood. Most of the blood we see in the game is changed so that it's a blue or green color, which is a lot less jarring to see. It's also ESRB friendly. Suddenly seeing normal red blood like this was very sobering. The blood here hints at the atrocities that were committed in this dungeon. For now, we don't know exactly what happened to all these people, but it's clear that they suffered. This dungeon is also home to many of the game's most horrifying enemies: ReDeads, bubbles, likes. In a room full of coffins, we have our first encounter with another spine-chilling monster, the Gibdos. These mummified creatures are basically just ReDeads. They walk the same, attack the same, and of course, have a petrifying scream. If you light a Gibdo on fire in Majora's Mask, the bandages disintegrate and reveal a ReDead underneath. So they're like literally the same thing. At least in these two games. In my opinion, I feel like the Gibdos are slightly less terrifying than the ReDeads, solely because those raps save me from having to look at the frightening appearance of those zombies. Cutting our way past these mummies, we end up locked in a room with white hands protruding out from the floor. Each arm is elongated and covered in bruises and bloodstains. They writhe in the ground, almost like whoever they belong to is begging for help. If Link gets too close, the hand swoops down and latches onto his skull. Those sharp red nails hold him in place as a giant monster lurches towards him. This is the Dead Hand. Okay, I don't really know what it is exactly. It looks nothing like any of the monsters we've seen so far. Navi's only advice is to watch out for its infinite hands and aim for the head. I was so glad that I handed off the controller once this thing popped up on screen. This pale demon is horrifying in every aspect. Its appearance, the way it moves, the way it attacks, everything about this mini-boss is perfectly crafted to horrify players. The creature's skin is covered in red blotches that you could assume are just a natural pattern on the Dead Hand's skin. But those deep red hands of theirs indicate to me that this is blood. Speaking of those hands, it's weird how the Dead Hand doesn't really have its own pair of hands. They're more like claws or stubs. I wonder if maybe the hands spread around the room are actually severed hands that still function despite being separated from the Dead Hand. It's kinda like how some snakes can still bite and inject venom even if their head's been severed. The Dead Hand also has sunken eyes that are veiled by a shadow, but you could read this as the monster not having any eyes at all. In the middle of battle, the Dead Hand will burrow underground and pop up to the surface whenever Link is grabbed by a hand. If the Dead Hand truly is blind, then maybe it uses a combination of sound, vibrations, and scent to navigate. This would explain why the dead hand can chase after Link despite staring up at the ceiling. Yet another unnerving aspect of the dead hand is the room where it appears. If you look closely at this texture used for the walls and ceilings, you can see that it's clearly made up of human skulls, possibly belonging to all of the dead hand's victims. Defeating this atrocious thing nets us the Lens of Truth, an item that looks eerily similar to the Sheikah eye symbol. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. This item is extremely useful for exposing invisible enemies and objects as well as fake walls and floors. It's an invaluable asset in the Shadow Temple, which is where we're heading next. Returning to Kakariko Village, we find that it's been set ablaze. Sheik warns us to stay back as an invisible force shoots out from inside the well. The ethereal enemy attacks Sheik, then circles back to Link, knocking him unconscious. When he wakes, Sheik informs us that an evil shadow spirit is what escaped from the well. This spirit was originally sealed by Impa until now. She's gone to the Shadow Temple in an attempt to seal the spirit once more, but she'll be in danger without help. Playing the Nocturne of Shadow on our ocarina transports us to the Shadow Temple's entrance. Just like with the bottom of the well, the Shadow Temple is brimming with nightmarish monsters dying to get their hands on our hero. There's not nearly as much blood in this temple, but the dungeon still has more than its fair share of disturbing features. Past a fake wall in the temple's main room, there's a wall with a skull on it. To our surprise, it speaks to us, and it states, "One who gains the Eye of Truth will be able to see what is hidden in the darkness." In the next room, there are a bunch of identical walls. We find the way forward using the Lens of Truth, and another skull speaks to us. Shadow Temple. Here is gathered Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred. Wonder what that could mean. We continue and yet another skull speaks to us. What is hidden in the darkness, tricks full of ill will. You can't see the way forward. Past yet another fake wall, we find the dead hand. Again. The fight plays out nearly identically to the battle we experienced as young Link. The main difference now is that we can use the Lens of Truth to track down the dead hand whenever it goes underground. If we place a bomb on top of its shadow, it'll rise back up to the surface. This technique is great because it means we'll no longer have to get grabbed by a hand to make the dead hand reappear. Still, I wonder if this dead hand is the same one we fought as a child or if it's a different one entirely. Those are both pretty bad options. I'd hope that only one of these disgusting things exists. Defeating the dead hand this time earns us the hover boots, which we use to progress deeper into the temple. Hey, do you see this bird statue in the temple's main area? Wasn't this thing like empty before? Like, isn't there a way to destroy all this and make it so that there's a big hole here at some point? I don't know why, but I remember looking down into a big empty hole here and seeing a monster staring back up at us. Is that just me? Is every copy of OOT personalized? I don't know, that could have just been a nightmare, but I swear there's a hole here. Exploring the temple, we begin to see some disturbing hazards. In a few of the rooms, we can find statues of two reapers holding scythes. They spin around constantly and cut up anything that falls in their blade's path. In another section of the temple, there are multiple guillotines placed back to back. These archaic execution devices are linked to Hyrule's history of greed and hatred. According to the Legend of Zelda encyclopedia, this temple was used for torturing and killing enemies of the royal family. The text states, "It is a place where the Sheikah, entrusted with the lives of Hyrule's royal family, have historically taken enemies of the royal family to be interrogated or worse. Because it stands as a symbol of Hyrule's dark history, it is taboo for the royal family to speak of this temple and its horrific purpose." This revelation is staggering. It completely alters your perception of the royal family in this game. It's a very interesting element for this world's lore. We can only hope that this Zelda someday denounces her ancestors for their crimes and doesn't adopt their cruel methods. I'm really glad that we agreed to help her out at the beginning of the game. I'm not really sure if Impa would have just calmly escorted us out from the castle if we said no. Since the bottom of the well is not too far from the Shadow Temple's entrance, I think it's safe to assume that this dungeon is a sub-area of the temple. There are a lot of jail cells and chains in the bottom of the well, so I wonder if it was used as a way to house additional prisoners that couldn't fit in the Shadow Temple. The amount of blood here also insinuates that torture was frequently conducted at the bottom of the well. Just want to add that I love how the 3DS remake has added this hooded skeleton at the front of the ferry. It's like Charon himself is guiding us through the river Styx. Apparitions even pass by as we ride into the Shadow Temple's depths. It's amazing. This short ferry ride also puts us on a straight path towards this temple's boss. To access the boss room, we use the lens of truth to see hidden platforms spread throughout a pitch-dark room. Behind a locked door, we fall down a hole that drops us into the lair of the phantom shadow beast, Bongo Bongo. Yeah, the name alone doesn't really inspire much fear. This is the shadowy spirit that escapes from the bottom of the well. Here in the Shadow Temple, we can finally see the creature in its true form, at least before it hides away in the darkness again. When I was younger, I couldn't really tell what Bongo Bongo was supposed to be. His face kinda looked like a flower, so I thought he was some kind of weird, mutated plant monster. It turns out that Bongo Bongo is actually something way darker than I could have ever guessed. If we take a step back and really look at this guy, you can see how he resembles an upper torso hanging down from the ceiling. His giant eyes where his head should be, and his arms appear to be cut in half. This aspect of Bongo Bongo's design is consistent in the 3DS remake as well. If we flip the camera around to the other side of Bongo Bongo, we can see his chest and abdomen. It's possible that this phantom was once human. Given how this temple was used for torturing enemies of the royal family, Bongo Bongo's mangled appearance could be a result of the torture that he endured. A popular theory posits that Bongo Bongo's backstory is explained by the old man in Kakariko village. When you speak to this man, he'll say, "A long time ago, there was a man in this very village who had an eye they said could see the truth." Now, usually you have to train your mind's eye most strenuously to actually see the truth, but this fella, no. They say he had his own way of doing things. His house stood where the well is now. If Bongo Bongo really is the man who could see the truth, this could explain his supernatural abilities. Maybe in addition to being able to see the truth, this man could also achieve other supernatural feats, which is why his spirit still lingers even after death, but he doesn't appear as a basic Poe. If he was killed and tortured in the Shadow Temple, maybe he stays in the world of the living to exact revenge on the Sheikah. Again, it's all just a theory, so don't get too hung up on all the details. Aside from Bongo Bongo's appearance, what scared me the most during this fight was his impressive speed. With the controller back in my hands, I tried my best to take down this monster, but before I could figure out what to do, those hands were strangling me in seconds. I only started to panic more and more as the Z targeting system continued to fail me throughout this fight. It's probably just a skill issue, but I can never get the Z targeting to work just right here. Constantly getting launched in the air meant that I couldn't go first person mode and just shoot the hands normally, but I felt like a genius when I finally slipped on those hover boots. I also remember feeling pretty anxious whenever Bongo Bongo would start to chant as he slammed his hands into the ground. It made me think that he was preparing some special attack or that he was casting some sort of spell. As we land the killing blow on the Phantom, he melts into a puddle of shadows and disappears. We save our last sage, and now we can finally destroy Ganondorf. With the power of the 6 sages, they conjure up a rainbow bridge that allows us to access Ganondorf's castle. But before we step inside, Can we take a sec to admire this castle? I've always loved its gothic aesthetic and the way it floated above a pool of lava. It reminded me a lot of Bowser's Keep from Super Mario RPG in the way that we can visit it at any time, but it remains inaccessible until the end of the game. In the 3DS remake, they've added these awesome little gargoyle statues to the castle. The goat skull and the bat wings make them look demonic. A perfect piece of decor for the King of Evil himself. I love all of these cool little flourishes that the remake adds, but I am kind of upset about how they handled other aspects of the game. For example, there's the dead hand. He's still creepy, sure, but he's missing all of those blood stains. His claws aren't bloody anymore either. They're like a weird, strange, purple, pinkish color. In fact, the bottom of the well and the Shadow Temple are missing all the blood slathered against the walls and floors. Yeah, it's not the end of the world, and I'm sure it was done to avoid anything above an E10 plus rating, but it's a pretty disappointing change. When I spotted blood in these areas in the original game, I realized that I was dealing with something a lot more serious than the previous areas. It was a real lean forward in your chair moment that's partially lost in the remake. But hey, at least they kept the skeletons and didn't replace the dead hand with some other monster entirely. Still though, I'll never forget walking into the bottom of the well and seeing real blood. That was such a shocking moment for me. Back to Ganondorf's castle, the interior maintains that spooky vibe conveyed from the castle's exterior. The rooms connected to the main hall each resemble the previous temples that we've explored. By dispelling each of the castle's barriers, we gain access to a room that leads up to the higher floors. At the top, we have a rematch game of ping pong with Ganondorf, and then the castle begins to crumble. The timed escape segment with Zelda was my greatest source of anxiety. Anytime those falling rocks hit me, I could feel my heart rate spike. Which was a tad dramatic, I'll admit. I feel like those 3 minutes that they give you are pretty generous. Anytime I was forced into a battle, I just spammed the spin attack over and over and over. No idea if that's the best method for dealing with these guys, but it worked for me, and it still works after all these years. At the bottom of the castle, Ganondorf rises up from the rubble and transforms into Ganon. This is a subtle detail, but I love that Ganon's boss text has no description for what he is. Previous bosses like Gohma and Baronade have some text that's paired with their names. Parasitic Armored Arachnid and Bioelectric Anemone respectively. But Ganon is just Ganon. No explanation, what you see is what you get. When he knocks the Master Sword out of Link's hand, that's how you know shit's about to get real. Now things are kicked up to 11 as you're forced to rely on other offensive options during this fight. Unless you took the time to get the big Goron sword, then you've got nothing to worry about. As if Ganon wasn't already extremely intimidating, the lighting during this fight goes an extra mile to make him look even more fearsome. The darkness makes it difficult to get a good look at Ganon's monster form. We can only make out the details once a flash of lightning lights up the arena. Other than that, all you can see are Ganon's piercing eyes and shimmering blades as he marches towards you. The best way to combat this beast shrouded in darkness is with your own arrows of light. It's awesome. It's also another thing that I don't really like about the remake. The arena is just way too bright. It feels a lot less oppressive and intimidating. You can also very clearly see Ganon. The glowing eyes feel a lot less cool when they're not cutting through the darkness. One little detail that the remake does retain is Zelda's horrified scream whenever Link is hit by one of Ganon's attacks. It's such a small little detail, but it contributes to the nerve-wracking atmosphere while also making Zelda feel real. It caught me so off guard when I first heard it. It was so rare back then to see characters verbally reacting to my own actions. Zelda's fear made me feel like I had to do everything I could to claim victory. I have no idea why it's all on me though. Girl, I've seen that F smash, get in here. The more I think about Zelda's perspective, the more I understand how horrifying it must be to see Ganon get an edge in battle. Can you imagine how terrifying it would be if Link just died? All 7 years spent trying to defeat Ganondorf just straight down the drain? Yeah, that would be so crazy. With the Master Sword back in our hands, we lay the final blow on Ganon. This cutscene was actually altered from versions 1.0 and 1.1 of OOT. In these versions of the game, Ganon actually has red blood instead of green blood. This red blood also appears in the initial Ganondorf fight. Even without the red blood, this cutscene is still super violent and I love it for that. I still remember the way that my jaw dropped when I saw Link lodge the Master Sword straight into Ganon's head. Name something more satisfying than that. With Ganondorf defeated and sealed inside the evil realm, Zelda returns Link to his original time where peace has returned to Hyrule. As the credits roll, we see a big party over at Lon Lon Ranch. The residents of Hyrule celebrate this new era of tranquility as the sages watch over them from Death Mountain. As much as I want to say, and they all lived happily ever after, we both know what comes next. A huge thank you to my Supernatural supporters over on Patreon. They actually got access to this video a few days before it went public on YouTube. It's a new benefit that I've launched for my Wraith Surge and Phantom Surge tiers. So if that's something you're interested in, consider becoming a patron maybe if you want. This video was created to celebrate hitting 10k subs and holy shit, it's a number that is still absolutely mind-boggling. I am so grateful for each and every one of you. When I first started this channel, I remember how giddy and excited I was when one of my videos broke 100 views. And now here we are at 10,000 subscribers. I know I've said it before, I'm gonna say it again, literally incapable of wrapping my head around that number. I've been watching YouTube since the very beginning, and I've always been on the gaming side of things. Whenever I'd watch some of my favorite YouTubers talk about a game, I'd think, damn, I wish they'd talk about this game. And then I realized one day, wait, I could talk about this game. And then I did. I know. Go search lore so deep. Also, before I go, I want to say that I've seen that a lot of my subscribers are artists/animators, and that is cool as hell. If you're an artist or an animator listening to this right now, what are you working on? Is it a Deltarune character? I'm just kidding. I know it is. Look down. Anyways, that is all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want me to cover the spooky aspects of more Zelda games, please let me know. Please give me an excuse to replay Majora's Mask. Alright, now I must go and prepare. Hades 2 is right around the corner, and I need to take care of some stuff before I lose hundreds of hours of my life. That's all I have for you. Take care.